I'm Maureen Bottrell. Last name is B as in boy, Ottrell.
May it please the court.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Ashton. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, Ms. Bottrell.
Good morning.
Can you introduce yourself to the jury and tell them what your occupation is?
I am a geologist forensic examiner with the FBI laboratory in the Trace Evidence Unit.
And how long have you worked for the FBI?
I've worked for the FBI for 16 years now.
And has it always been in this position?
It has.
Okay. And can you give us your educational background?
I have a Bachelor's of Science in Geology and a Master's of Science also in Geology, both from the University of Georgia. I've taken numerous training courses in various types of instrumentation and also in the analysis of particular types of materials. I've also participated in various continuing education programs since I've been employed with the FBI.
And the actual title that you hold is what exactly?
Geologist, forensic examiner.
Okay. And have you taken any additional courses in geology and as a forensic scientist in geology?
I have taken additional courses specifically in the analysis of soil materials and also in using particular analytical techniques for the analysis of soils.
And in addition to that, have you lectured or given any types of training on the topic?
I have lectured numerous times and given several training courses, both in forensic geology for other people and also in the use of particular types of instrumentation.
Have you published any work on the topic?
I have. My most recent article was a review article for glass analysis.
Okay. So, if I understand you correctly, your specialty doesn't only deal with soil and minerals, it also deals with glass as well? Or is
That's correct. As a geologist forensic examiner, my main duties are the analysis of geologic materials like soils, rocks, minerals, gemstones, and those things that we make out of them that are very like artificial rocks. So things like glass and building materials like cements.
And have you testified as an expert witness in the area of geology?
I have.
Where and how many times?
I have testified approximately 40 times, and that has been in various locations, both in federal and state courts, including here in the state of Florida.
Your Honor, at this time, I would move to have Ms. Bottrell entered as an expert witness in the area of geology.
No objection.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the witness will be accepted as an expert witness in the area of geology. You may proceed.
Thank you, sir. How did you get involved in this case initially?
I received evidence in this case as part of the regular analytical process at our laboratory. The evidence was sent in. We determined that geologic examination might be useful, and so it was sent on to me.
Okay. And why does the FBI have a geologist on staff?
Well, for a geologic examination, what we're typically doing for forensic purposes is a comparison analysis. Could two or more materials have come from the same source? So is the soil that I'm finding on one thing, could it have come from this known source that we're looking at? So the example I usually give is that if a burglary took place and somebody walked across a lawn, I might get their shoes to see if they had soil from that lawn that was the same, in which case we can't eliminate that as being a possible location. The other types of analysis that we do are provenance studies, which they will send in materials to us and we will try and tell you where they came from. So I might get a soil and they might want to know where on in the state or the country this could possibly have come from. And we'll do a geologic analysis to try and pinpoint the location. The other types of analysis that we do are when we get in materials and they don't know what they are, we'll try and determine what they are and report back on what we found.
And how is this done?
This is done with standard geologic analysis that is used by geologists all over. We start out by looking at some of the more obvious things with the materials that we get. First of all, we'll look and see if the object that has been sent into us actually has anything on it that we can compare. So if we get a pair of shoes and there's no soil on them, our examination is complete. But if there's soil or something else like that on there, we will collect it up, and then we'll start doing the analysis. So we start with the obvious things. What is the color of this soil? What is the texture of this soil? If we're doing a comparison, if we're looking at two different colors of soil, well, they couldn't have originated from the same source, and our examination will stop at that point. If they're the same, then it'll go on, and we'll start looking at some of the more detailed textural features. Not only just things like whether or not the samples have the same grain size. Am I looking at sand compared to gravel? Again, those would be different, and our analysis would stop. But also with microscopic features that we might see, like how rounded are the individual sand grains that we're seeing? Do they contain inclusions of unusual materials? Things like that. We're doing that sort of comparison. The final step in our analysis is going to be the determination of what minerals we're actually looking at. So what is the actual composition of this soil? If all those things are identical, then they could have come from the same source. And we will report it as being that that source cannot be eliminated as a potential source of this material. With provenance, we're looking at different things. We do the same type of analysis with color, texture, and mineralogy, but the aim is to try and figure out where this could have been. So we're looking for any unique type of minerals or sets of minerals that would tell us that this was in a particular location. So that's the type of analysis that we're doing. And usually this is accomplished with light microscopes. We'll use a stereo binocular microscope, which gives us relatively low power, up to about 400x. That's 400 times magnification of the materials. We'll look at it under that. And also with transmitted light microscopes. So we're actually looking with a petrographic microscope, which is a microscope set up with particular optical properties that allows us to identify minerals.
So the instruments that you use are, to identify these types of soils are two different types of microscopes, one that transmits different lights and a stereo microscope. Is that correct?
Typically, yes. We do have other instrumentation at our disposal, but we only use that rarely when at need.
And how many geologists are employed with the FBI?
There are 3 of us.
Okay. And did you receive evidence in this case from, I'd like to actually refer you to your report dated March 4th of 2009.
Okay.
If you have that in front of you, that might assist you in being able to answer some of the questions that I'm going to ask you.
I have that report.
Did you receive items from the Pontiac Sunfire vehicle with the Florida tag G63XV, which, Your Honor, for the record, both the state and the defense have stipulated that this is Ms. Anthony's vehicle?
I did.
Okay, and what exactly did you receive from the vehicle?
I received debris that had been collected from the trunk and areas in and around the trunk of the car.
Okay. And did you also receive a shovel?
I did.
And, Your Honor, for the record, both the state and defense have agreed that this is the shovel testified by Brian Berner.
That's correct.
Okay?
And did you receive items from the Anthony home at 4937 Hope Spring Drive, which consisted of shoes?
Yes, I did. I received shoes and also what was identified to me as being a transport bag.
How many pairs of shoes did you receive, if you can
There were
look?
22 pairs of shoes.
22 pairs, okay. And did you then receive items of evidence from evidence markers from the location off Suburban Drive where Caylee Marie Anthony's remains were recovered?
I did.
And can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what your conclusions were after you examined these and conducted your tests?
If I may have just a moment with counsel.
Yes.
As to the soil samples, there's a stipulation that the soil samples were taken from the scene after the top layers were scraped away.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank
After
you.
All right,
the
thank you.
plant and other items were taken. I'm sorry, we interrupted you. Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what tests you ran and what your results were?
Well, for the material that came from the trunk of the vehicle and for the soil, I was being asked to do a provenance study. Where did these materials come from? And in the car, 2 of the samples, there was insufficient material for us to actually examine it and do a good provenance study. So those were set aside. With the remaining sample from the trunk of the car, it was a mix of materials, which is not uncommon out of the trunk or floor mats of a car. But because the material was mixed, we were seeing things from multiple different sources. You can't really do a good provenance study because you can't unmix those to tell where each individual component came from. I can't know which ones, which components belong to each location. So those samples were not suitable for a provenance study. For the
Let me stop you there. So as it relates to the car, there was nothing that you were able to identify that was able to connect the car to the scene of Suburban Drive.
There was actually no comparison done between the material in the car to the scene.
Okay. Go on. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No problem. And for the shovel, again, we were asked to do a provenance study. Where did the material from the shovel come from? And that study was underway when the body was found. And so the provenance study was stopped because they were looking for a potential location for where the body was from the material off the soil. And since the body was found, that examination was no longer needed. So that examination was stopped before it was completed.
And is that all you had on that topic, on that item of evidence?
Yes.
Okay, let me ask you this while we're on that topic. Were you ever asked or instructed to go back to try and compare anything from the scene to that specific shovel?
No.
And you can go on with the next example.
And for the shoes, the majority of the shoes either had no geologic material on them. In fact, some of them appeared to be unworn. Or the material that was on them was so limited that we couldn't do a comparison. 3 pairs of the shoes had some geologic material on them that we could actually do a comparison. And of those 3 pairs of shoes, the material that we recovered from them is different from the crime scene. So it could not have originated from that location.
So if I understand your results correctly, most of the shoes were clean. They didn't have any soil materials or anything. They appeared to not even have much wear and tear. Is that correct?
Some of them appeared to have been unworn. Some of them had been worn, but there wasn't very much material on them. There were only 3 that had a significant amount of soil that we could actually do a comparison with.
And the only 3 that appeared to be dirty, the soil from there differed from the soil off the Suburban Drive.
That's correct.
Okay. Are there anything other items or any other exams that you did?
There was also the transport bag that was examined, and there was insufficient material in the transport bag for comparison.
And the reason you test the transport bag is because you want...
Could counsel specify which item that goes with? I'm not sure what transport bag that is.
Absolutely. The transport bag was the bag that the shoes came in, correct?
That was my understanding, yes.
And the reason that you test the bag is because some of the soil might fall off of the shoes and end up on the bag.
That's correct.
And were you able to have anything from the bag that could assist you in connecting Caylee Anthony's shoes to Suburban Drive?
No.
Were there any other examinations that you did?
No, that was it.
For this? Okay. I have no further questions, Judge.
Cross-examination?
Very briefly. Does your examination establish that the 3 pair of shoes you did examine had never been at the location on Suburban Drive?
No, you cannot determine that with a soil comparison.
Explain to the jury why.
There's many things that can happen with soils as well as with shoes as you come in contact with the scene. You can walk across the scene and not have any soil transferred onto the shoes. In which case, when we do an examination, I won't see any soil and will not be able to connect you to the scene. You can also walk through the scene and have soil transfer, which then later falls off. Soil easily falls off of shoes, especially if it's a very sandy soil. So you would not, it's not preserved on the shoes. So again, there would be no material that I could actually compare and connect it back with that scene. Or you can walk across an area, you can get soil on your shoes, you can walk someplace else, get more soil on your shoes, and now I'm seeing a mix of multiple materials, and collectively they will not look like the original location. Or alternately, you can have never been there. But of all four of those possibilities, I can't tell them apart scientifically. So I can't know which one of those mechanisms is in place. And if I can't tell, then I can't say that they were never there, because one of the other three possibilities could have been true, that no soil transferred, or the soil fell off, or the soil became contaminated with other material.
So the absence of soil is meaningless in terms of establishing someone's presence or lack of presence at a particular area.
That's correct.
No further questions.
Redirect.
Ma'am, you're employed by the FBI to look for evidence, are you not?
I'm employed by the FBI as a geologist forensic examiner, yes.
And the purpose of you receiving all of these items was to look for evidence, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you did not find any meaningful to connect Caylee Anthony to Suburban Drive.
That's correct, I didn't.
And you can only testify about science and actual items of evidence that you actually recovered, correct?
Objection, leading.
Sustain, rephrase the question.
Yes, sir. Can you testify to anything other than science and items of evidence that you recover?
No.
And those scenarios that you just testified to for Mr. Ashton, those are all speculation, correct?
Well, those are all possibilities that could happen. And if I were to choose which one was in place in this case, that would be speculating.
Okay, exactly. And that's not what you're doing here today. You're not speculating.
No, I'm not.
You're only looking at the items of evidence that you searched for, correct?
I'm only looking at the items of evidence that I received and testifying to what I found.
Exactly, and not to any other speculation.
No.
No further questions.
Okay, will the witness be excused?
As far as the state's concerned, yes.
Defense? Yes, sir. Thank you, ma'am. You may be excused.
Thank you.
My name is Madeline Montgomery, Madeline Montgomery.
Good morning. May it please the court, Your Honor?
You may proceed.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Ms. Montgomery.
Good morning.
Can you please introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury and tell them what your occupation is?
Yes. My name is Madeline Montgomery, and I'm a forensic toxicologist with the FBI laboratory in Quantico, Virginia.
And how long have you been employed by the FBI?
I've been employed by the FBI laboratory for 15 years.
And could you share with us your educational background?
Sure. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry from the George Washington University, which is in Washington, D.C. I've also taken graduate level courses from the George Washington University in forensic chemistry and forensic toxicology.
And have you received any additional training in forensic chemistry?
Yes, I have received training by the FBI as well as by different instrument vendors that we work with in forensic chemistry, and I've taken continuing education in both forensic chemistry and in forensic toxicology.
And what is the difference between toxicology and forensic chemistry?
Forensic chemistry is a very broad subject. It could include anything from arson testing to explosive residue testing, to analysis of a sample suspected to be a drug. Forensic toxicology is specifically the study or detection and study of drugs and poisons in people. So I analyze things like blood, urine, hair, and autopsy samples such as liver and brain for the presence of drugs and poisons.
And how are you normally approached to do this? Is it through the FBI or through state agencies or medical examiners' offices? How does the work come to you?
Well, in the work that I do, I would say more than half of the work I do actually supports local and state investigations. We have equipment that not all state and local forensic toxicology labs have. So we have the ability to do more sophisticated testing. So we may get involved for specific requests if a local medical examiner or state forensic lab can't do the analysis. But then we also support FBI investigations all across the U.S.
And have you done any or published any work in the areas of forensic chemistry or toxicology?
Yes, I have.
How many articles or publications have you?
Just guessing, I would say between 10 and 20 peer-reviewed published journal articles.
And do you belong to any professional organizations?
Yes, I am an active member of both the Society of Forensic Toxicologists and the International Association of Forensic Toxicologists. I serve as the secretary of the Young Scientists Committee on the International Association of Forensic Toxicologists, and I serve as the executive secretary on the Scientific Working Group for Forensic Toxicology.
And could you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what the Scientific Working Group for Forensic Toxicology is?
Sure. Scientific working groups are different groups of professionals that are trying to set the standards for their field. So for our toxicology working group, we're trying to gather all the different types of forensic toxicologists, everyone from the people that do driving under the influence testing to the people that do coroner's work to try to set standards for the minimum levels of education, the minimum types of quality assurance that are needed in the lab, just to make things equal across the field.
And have you testified as an expert witness in the areas of forensic chemistry and forensic toxicology in the past?
Yes, I have.
How many times and where?
11 times.
And where?
I've testified in numerous state courts, federal court, and in military court.
Judge, at this time, we would ask that the court recognize Ms. Montgomery as an expert witness in the area of forensic chemistry and toxicology.
No objection.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Ms. Montgomery will be accepted as an expert witness in the area of forensic chemistry and toxicology.
Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to refer to your report of March 13th, 2009. Do you recall receiving items of evidence to test?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And what exactly was that, or were those items?
I received a hair sample to test.
And this would be the Q59 hair mass coming from the remains of Caylee Marie Anthony?
That is correct, yes.
Judge, there's a stipulation between the prosecution and the defense that this came from the area of Suburban Drive.
Your Honor, the item is in evidence, so I don't think a stipulation is necessary. The jury heard testimony. If we could just refer to it by its evidence number.
Okay, Madam Clerk, what is the evidence, the state's evidence number? Okay. You may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, ma'am, as it relates to evidence item 271, what instruments do you use to test hair?
Well, as far as biological samples go, hair is actually fairly complex. So the first thing we do in the laboratory is we have to, what we're interested in is any chemicals that might be within the hair itself. And that's because chemicals can be incorporated into our hair as it grows. So we need to get to the inside of the hair. So we will physically break apart the hair, in this case with liquid nitrogen, which makes it very cold and very brittle, so it'll break on impact, and we make it into a dust. Then that dust is extracted overnight in a chemical solvent, so that any drugs or poisons that we're interested in will be leached into that solvent. Then the next day, we do further purification techniques on that solvent and make what we call an extract. And then that extract is taken along with samples of known blank hair and hair that we've added drug or poison to, which are our control samples. Those would all be taken to the instrument that is called a liquid chromatograph mass spectrometer.
Okay. And do you have training on the liquid chromatograph mass spectrometer?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And is your knowledge of utilizing that device extensive?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And tell the ladies and the gentlemen of the jury what you tested for.
In this case, I was initially asked if we could test for alprazolam and clonazepam.
And what are those?
Alprazolam, you might know, is commonly known as Xanax. That's one of the prescription names. And clonazepam, you might know as Klonopin. They also have other names and can be sold as generics. But they are from a class of drugs called benzodiazepines. They can be used to help someone sleep, to help calm them down, and they can also be used before surgery, again, to help calm someone down.
Okay. And what were the results for those two drugs?
The testing I did for those drugs was negative in the hair sample.
Now, I know I'm going to butcher the names of these other drugs, but please bear with me. You were also asked to look for a drug, Fluniz. You can help me with the rest.
I can help you. The initial testing that was done was for, as I said, the alprazolam and clonazepam. While this evidence was in the laboratory, we were already validating a new method that included not only alprazolam and clonazepam, but 9 other drugs. And this method was superior to the method we were currently using. So the timing worked out so that while we still had the evidence in the house, I was able to test it again to look again for the alprazolam and the clonazepam, but this time at much lower levels. And then I looked for 9 other drugs as well, which included 8 drugs in the same class as the alprazolam and clonazepam. They're called benzodiazepines. It would include other benzodiazepines such as diazepam, which is Valium, flunitrazepam, which you may have heard of. The media calls it roofies, or the date rape drug. It's one of the drugs associated with sexual assault. And then a series of other benzodiazepines and their metabolites, or the chemicals that our body breaks them down into. And then the last drug that is in the method that I looked for is called ketamine, which is a veterinary tranquilizer that is also abused in the club scene and used for its hallucinogenic properties.
And can you tell the ladies and gentlemen, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 other drugs. Is that correct?
That's correct. 10 benzodiazepines plus ketamine.
Okay. And can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what the results were when you searched for those drugs?
My results were all negative.
And can you explain, you mentioned that you had a new technique that was even more sensitive than the one you had previously had. Is that correct?
That's correct.
How much more?
On the order of about 10 or so.
Okay. 10 times more? Is that what
10
you said?
times more sensitive, yes.
Okay. And were there any other drugs that you tested for?
No.
Okay. And as far as this report is concerned, were you able to, I just want to double check, make sure. As far as this report is concerned, did you test any other items?
No, I did not.
Okay. Now, you can't testify as to anything outside of the results of the tests you did. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you can't guess whether how much use would be required before these drugs would show up in the hair, can you?
Objection leading.
Sustain, rephrase the question.
You don't know how much exposure a person would have before these results show up, do you?
Objection leading.
Overrule.
The thing about hair testing after limited exposure is that even in controlled studies where someone is given a known amount of a specific drug and then their hair is tested, we're not always able to detect the drug in the hair. So the answer is, I don't know. There is no, certainty with how much drug someone needs to be given or needs to take before it will show up as positive in their hair.
And you can't speculate as to whether it's 1 time or 20 times before it actually shows up, right?
No, I cannot.
All you can say is, we do these highly sensitive tests, and they're either positive or they're negative.
Objection leading.
Sustain.
All you can say, well, let me rephrase that. Is all you can say that you did these tests and they came back negative?
That is correct.
I have no further questions, Judge.
Cross-examination.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So in summary, the negative result is forensically meaningless. It doesn't mean the person wasn't given the drug. It doesn't mean they were. It just doesn't mean anything.
It means that I did not find any evidence of the drug having been given, correct?
But it still could have been given and not shown up in the hair.
That is correct. Hair is not the best sample for drug exposure.
So in determining whether someone has been given a drug or not, a negative result really doesn't answer that question.
No, it does not.
And even if it did answer the question, it only tells you historic use of drugs. It doesn't give you chronic use of drugs.
Well, it depends on how the testing is done. If you were to test someone like me with long hair, I could look at the length of the hair to look at different time periods of exposure, and that would indicate if I was positive down the entire length of my hair that I was a chronic user of a certain drug. But in this case, the hair was such that we had to look at it in bulk, meaning we had to look at it as one sample. So even had it been positive, I wouldn't be able to say when or how often the person was exposed.
And if someone were exposed to something and died immediately or very closely, it wouldn't appear in the hair anyway.
That is correct.
And you're not able to test for chloroform, are you?
Not in hair samples, no.
Is there anything about your findings that would have indicated that this child drowned?
I have no expertise in that area.
Nothing further.
Redirect.
Ms. Montgomery, what other kind of meaningless work do you do at the FBI?
I don't feel that any of my work is meaningless.
Okay. And the chloroform that you test, the reason you didn't test for chloroform is that study, that type of analysis is not done by your lab, correct?
We don't look for chloroform in hair samples. We will look for chloroform in liquid biological samples, but not in hair.
And you were made aware that Dr. Goldberger was the one that was doing that, correct?
Hearsay.
Judge,
Sustain.
do you have knowledge as to whether that was done by another scientist?
Objection. Hearsay.
Sustain.
Your Honor, this is an expert witness who is...
Sustain.
Now, the reason, obviously you testified that certainly your work is not meaningless. The reason that you do tests is to search for evidence, correct?
We do tests to answer questions, yes.
Yes. And in this case, you had a sample, you did the test, and the results came back negative.
That is correct.
No further questions.
Okay, may the witness be excused.
As far as the state's concerned,